Hello. In the last lecture we discussed about the housing strategy for the new housing areas of a city. Today we will discuss about the principles of plotted housing as a subset of the new housing strategy for a city. So, before we come to the plotted housing and its principles of planning, let us have a quick recap what we discussed last day. We discussed that the housing for the new areas, the major part of the work involves land assembly, because you need more amount of land to create more number of housing. So, 4 methods we discussed, either land acquisition, or you can go for land readjustment, you can go for development control, or you can go for public private partnership. So, through this methodologies you can assemble lands. Second part will be the land subdivision. So, land subdivision is basically the methodology to divide a bigger chunk of land into small pieces of land based on our requirement. So, requirement may be in the terms of plotted housing and group housing. So, we will discuss one by one today's and next lecture. After this we discuss the that while we make the land subdivision considering the population and the type of the housing required, the concept like transit oriented development, the concept like compact city, smart city and non-motorized transportation and some other concepts should be considered before the land subdivision, because land subdivision is the method or action which will determine the type of housing which will come in a particular plot. Next we discuss the investment and development strategy. So, investment and development strategy could be public by government organization, it could be joint ventures using public and private both investment, and it could be private as well. Land disposal mechanism, land disposal if the land is acquired by the government, that is the public land. So, public land is developed for some township or some public purpose. So, that land should be distributed over or allocated or disposed through a common lottery system. Otherwise, if it is acquired by the private party, private investor, separate mechanism can be thought out. And apart from that, there could be check and balance by the public authority. We discussed few principles of land subdivision like levels of planning. We discussed that the planning is done at the several levels, at the cluster level, neighborhood level, sector level and also at the city level. So, based on the population, like we started the discussion at the cluster level, which is nothing but the cluster of few families, few blocks or buildings which shares a common facilities in terms of a small open space or small facility. Similarly, at the neighborhood level, at the sector level or at the little higher, that is city or sub-city level, various kinds of facility defines its level or the hierarchy. The access roads also were discussed. 2 types of access road we discussed, one is local road and collector road. So, local road and collector roads both give the access to the plots. Small roads provides access to the smaller plots, bigger roads provides the access to the bigger plots. That is the principles, and collector road collects all the trips from the small or the local roads and takes to the arterial road or the major junction, so that the zone to zone transportation within a city is possible. Then intended development beyond the city limit, when we go for new housing areas, new housing strategy. So, our intention that what kind of development, what scenarios of the development we want to have. So, based on that intention, that vision, or how do you want to see the city, those kind of parameters also can influence the land subdivision exercise. Fourth, we discussed about the size and shape of the plot, that the size and shape of the plot should be such that our wastage of the land should be absolutely minimum, because we told in various occasions that land is a very scarcely commodity. So based on that, the size and shape of the plot will be the optimum, and it should be determined by the calculation of the population to be accommodated within the plot, and accordingly the size can be determined. Then build form and the urban design. Urban design is the design which consists more than one building, more than one blocks, more than one building complexes in a different plots. So that's the urban design, how we can bring some harmony, some concept, some visual continuum in a series of plots or series of building blocks. That's the urban design as a whole. Apart from that, there are features like build form, other build form, which also can be integrated in the overall development of the building. Then distribution of the facility. So distribution of the facility is done at the various levels, cluster level, neighborhood level, and sector level. So now, based on this discussion, we will have a discussion on plotted housing. So plotted housing is one subset of the larger land subdivision around the city. So in around the city, for the new areas what we are going to develop for the future population or future housing, the some part could be plotted housing and some part could be group housing by and large. So plotted housing, as discussed or as defined earlier also, that plotted housing is basically small plots which can accommodate minimum 1 or maximum 2 or 3 dwelling units in a particular plot. So 1, 2 or maybe 3 dwelling unit per plot can be accommodated. But here the land ownership or the plot ownership belongs to the first owner, who is owning the plot, and maybe the second and the third owners, those can be for them the house can be given on rent. So while we talk about the total number of ownership in terms of its buildability, but the basic differentiation of the plotted housing than the group housing is that within a plot the owner enjoys the ownership of the building and the plot both. So if this is a plotted housing, so ownership belongs to the plot as well as building both. But in group housing, when it is a group housing, but when we talk about group housing, it is not like that. The plot is bigger and definitely there are more number of building, so that many people can stay together and can enjoy some common facility. So here the ownership of the plot is by community, not by individual, but ownership by the apartment or the unit you are staying is by the individual. That is the fundamental difference of the plotted housing and group housing. So based on that, we will discuss the plotted housing and its implication. So plotted housing, you can understand that in plotted housing an individual owner enjoys his or her sole ownership on the land and the plot. He can do whatever he wants to develop, the kind of building, kind of landscaping, kind of coloring, etc. But definitely some development controls are there that he has to abide by. Now if this is a neighborhood, I hope you have already understood the concept of neighborhood, concept of cluster. In the last lecture we have discussed the concept of cluster, neighborhood, sector, then city or sub-city level. Sub-city level. So we are talking about how at the neighborhood level we can go into further subdividing the plots into smaller pieces of plots for the individual owners. That is the plotted housing. So probably you have earmarked the various sector or various neighborhood in overall land subdivision, and you have earmarked this plot as a plotted housing, and this plot as a group housing, or this plot as a cooperative housing, whatever it may be. So how how we will proceed for the plotted housing? Now based on the overall housing strategy or the city plan strategy, some population definitely will be assumed. So based on the population we can determine the number of plots and the size of plot. So considering, for example, in a neighborhood, in a population, we have to accommodate say 6,000 people. So 6,000 people means, if we consider at the rate of 5% per household, then which will equate to 1200 dwelling unit. That means 1200 families will be living there. So for discussion or for our convenience, if you consider that one plot, that two dwelling unit or two family will be sharing one plot, will be sharing each plot, then number of plot will be 600. Now this 600 numbers of plot can be higher income group, can be middle income group, or can be lower income group. So based on your overall strategy or overall mandate given by the housing strategy exercise, you can determine the ratio. Let us example that out of 600 your ratio for different category of housing is, say for example, say HIG is to MIG is to LIG, say 2:3:5. So in that case, if the total number is 600, then your HIG will be right. Right. So this is the final number of plots you have to accommodate in for each particular economic group. Now definitely based on their affordability, the size of the plot for higher income group, middle income group and lower income group will not be similar or same. So how do you determine the size of the plot? Let us take another example. For example, for our convenience we are calculating it in a very easier manner, in a simplified manner, but the actual calculation could be little more intricate also. But let us understand at least some basic theory, basic assumptions, so that we can understand, and whenever we will work we can execute that, or you can apply that with a simple mathematical calculation. Now let us take an HIG plot. So in HIG plot, now based on the city size or the city profile, we can take a average size of the HIG dwelling unit. For example, let us assume the size of HIG unit, say 150 square meter. We are assuming it can be 200, it can be 120, it can be any amount. So 150 square meter. So if we want to accommodate 2 unit per if we want to accommodate 2 unit per plot, so this is the built up area. So built up area per plot considering two dwelling unit per plot will be 300 square meter. So this becomes the total built up area in a plot for a higher income group plotted housing plot. Now let us go to that discussion of the floor space index. 2-3 lectures back we discussed that the density is very much related to the concept of floor area ratio or floor space index. So floor space index is nothing but the total built up area divided by the plot area. Now if this is the total built up area, and let us assume the plot area as A. So based on our FAR formula, we know that FAR is equal to total built up area divided by plot area. So therefore if now you can check to the building regulations and the development control whether the FAR provided to that area is 2 or 1.5 or 1.75 or 2.5. So let us assume that FAR is 2 and total built up area we know 300. So plot area is A, right. So therefore A becomes A is equal to 150 square meter, right. So this becomes the size of the plot. So similarly we can calculate the size of the each plot HIG, MIG and LIG. Now if you want to make a variation of the plot sizes, it is possible that within the same economic group you can try to bring little more variation. For example, HIG2, HIG1, HIG3, MIG1, MIG2, MIG3, starting from the basic unit to the little higher unit to the little bigger unit. So considering that, for example, you have taken 150 square meter per unit, you can consider like 120 square meter. You also can consider 200 square meter. So based on that, for example, HIG could be 200, 150, 120. We can assume MIG as 100, 80 or 60 in square meter, right. Similarly, LIG could be 50, 40, 30. So this type of variations you can bring in a project, I mean to assume, and then you can play with the size of the plot area. Now so once you come to the plot size and the number of plots, now it is up to you that how you are going to accommodate all those plots in a particular given land chunk of land. So here you have to go back again to the concept of cluster which we discussed. So traditionally in a neighborhood there could be 4 cluster, 5 cluster or 6 cluster. So based on the facilities. Now in this junction, let us take a look of the what are the ingredients which makes a neighborhood, what are the ingredients in terms of the facilities and the land. So here basically 4 types of components you are dealing with to make up plotted development in a particular piece of land. The number one is the plot itself, plots for house. Number 2 is the facilities. Right, facilities means commercial, school, health, educational, all these things facilities. 3 is recreational. Or open space, and 4th is your network. network. Now these are the broad 4 components of your plotted housing. Out of these 4 components, these 2 components are basically built component, and these 2 is basically not built or unbuilt component. Right. So purpose of giving the facilities as a built component is to enable the houses to get the essential services like the day to day service like vegetable or grocery or any types of facilities which we want from our neighborhood for day to day or everyday basis. The purpose of recreational is to give the people who are living there as a psychological or mental relief. When you go to some park or the playground, when children play in the playground, they get the mental satisfaction. So this is one of the important need for the recreational. You meet with your people or meet with your friends or relations. So that is, so recreational space is fulfilling your need for your relations, need for your social need, and this is fulfilling your some of the basic need. And also the network, which is another component of unbuilt element, this is giving you the access. So the facility is giving you the essential service. The recreational spaces are giving you the fulfilling social or recreational facility or need fulfilling, and network is fulfilling your access need or connectivity need. Now it is very important to see that in a plotted development how you keep a balance between the built component and unbuilt component. Unbuilt component is very important to make a relation between the built and unbuilt component. Now there could be 2 approach. One approach could be, now in this point we have to go back to the discussion of the hierarchy of the planning which we discussed last lecture. We discussed that hierarchy will be in terms of the cluster, in terms of the neighborhood, and then the higher level of the planning like sector. But here we are dealing with a simple one neighborhood for our convenience of the discussion. In one neighborhood, how we can come out with a very specific distribution of the plots or the land area for plotted areas and the network areas. So for that we can distribute the open space or open recreational area and facilities. So these 2 are very important part. One is the unbuilt component, another is built component. These 2 area, how you are distributing open space and facilities over the whole area, based on that you can take 2 approach. One approach is you can go for distribution with a hierarchy approach. Hierarchy approach. So hierarchy approach enables you that if this is the total component, you can distribute over 4 component, and each 4 component can have further 4 micro component. So this is the hierarchy approach. Another approach could be that you can distribute the open space and facilities as a continuity. So another is if this is your neighborhood, so your clusters could be based on, you can be placed on different location and different fashion, and some part could be a continuous area to provide the facilities and open space as a continuous set of access or continuous facilities or continuous accessibility. So from every location they can access. Now based on these 2, these two have different advantage and disadvantage. If you provide the facilities and open space in the hierarchical approach, that means for open, you are placing open space for every sector, every component separately. You are provide facilities for every cluster separately, but here you are not providing the open space and cluster separately, but you are providing as a continuous stretch of land, right. So here the hierarchical approach, the advantage is that here it is distributed almost evenly, but here the distribution could be evenly or it can be centralized also, centralized. So basically here the distribution is centralized because the facilities and open space we are giving at the center, we are not giving in the other side, considering or assuming that everybody will be able to reach that facility with easy connectivity. So apart from this, it has the advantage and disadvantage in separate aspect also. For example, in this approach everybody will be able to reach their facility within vicinity, but for bigger facilities they have to walk far, because for example there is a larger facility, say primary school. So somebody living here, they can approach the local open space or toddlers with like say 40 to 50 meters away from their house, but on the other hand for accessing a primary school or a little bigger facility at the neighborhood level, they have to walk a lot. On the other hand, if this kind of continuous approach is taken, we can place various kind of facility in different location. So everybody gets all the facility, but in a different type of accessibility. Now, so these two approach can give us two different scenario or two different methodology to make a plotted housing. Now let us discuss some of the element related to network. So we discussed about the open space and the facilities which could be distributed as a distributed area as per the hierarchy, or it could be continuous. Now for the network, the objective of the network is to connect the open space and facility. Some basic principles are there which we should maintain for laying of the network or the connectivity. If this is the peripheral road, which is usually a higher level of road, maybe local road and maybe collector road, maybe subarterial road, maybe arterial road. So usually at the higher level of road, we do not make too many punctures giving the local road. So this is one entry, this is another entry, this could be another entry. So around the periphery, we max to max we can give more than like two puncture in a one side, one puncture in this side, another puncture in this side. So interface with local road and the higher road should be minimum at the periphery. So in the periphery, the puncture or interface with local road and the higher road will be minimum. Second is that inside the neighborhood you can make n numbers of the junctions with the local road, and that is inevitable. For example, there could be junctions like this. There could be roads like that. So here, even if this kind of junctions are there with a very close vicinity like 40 meters or 50 meters, even then it is not that much dangerous, as dangerous like if we get too much puncture in the peripheral area, because in the peripheral area high speed traffic or more number of traffic is there. So we do not disturb the more number of traffic road in a more numbers of puncture, maybe one or two punctures. So, that is the number 2 principle, that is the number of junction inside and outside. Then another very important part is the segregation of vehicular and non-vehicular circulation. Here you can see that it is basically based on the vehicular road network, which may be 10 meter or 11 meter or 12 meter, but what about the non-vehicular, those who are walking? So non-vehicular road network and walkability is also a very important parameter here. So if you find that this distance is very long, say more than 200 meter, so think about an example that there is a bus stand, here, somewhere here, and my house is here. So how do I come here? I have to go there and come like this. So why not we can have a pedestrian connection here, or maybe here, or maybe here, or maybe here. So in the several locations, irrespective of your vehicular connection, we can have many numbers of pedestrian connection to provide the pedestrians or to provide the common people to access to their plots from the public transport terminals or public transport stoppages. So that is another principle, that is the vehicular and non-vehicular interface. Like, apart from this vehicular and non-vehicular interface, inside the neighborhood, now based on your principle of hierarchy approach or the continuous approach, you can make the road network in a different fashion. Now after this discussion, let us have quickly some pictures of plotted housing, so that you can understand the principle in a better way. So here you can see that this plotted housing is done on the basis of the hierarchical approach. This is one neighborhood. Every neighborhood is constituting one separate cluster. The facilities are distributed, although the open space or the recreational open space is continuous. In this example I showed before also, here also you can see that all the facilities, these are distributed over the neighborhood, and the punctures of the local road from the major roads only one, not multiple, because to reduce the accident, to reduce the congestion. But inside the neighborhood you can have multiple numbers of junction, multiple number of punctures as well. This is a plotted layout for the very poor people of low income group housing. Here you can see that even if the vehicular puncture is not there, in various points the pedestrians punctures are there, so that people can walk and reach their destination. So this kind of elements are there in a plotted housing. Here also you can see the pedestrians puncture, and this is the major road. Inside the road you also can see various different kind of punctures, I mean the local road. So that is possible if it is a within the neighborhood, but outside the neighborhood we cannot have the more number of puncture, maybe 1, 2, maybe another 1, 3. So that is the major concept. Now in this layout you can see that it is the concept, the second approach, where we discuss that the open space and facilities are provided as a centralized green areas, centralized area, where or a continuous fashion. In this continuous fashion, one element is clear, that you won't find very defined hierarchy of the open space. The boundary of the open space is very much irregular, whereas in the earlier example we have seen that the boundary of the open space are very much regular. Here only the central open space is very much regular, which is rectangle, but other open spaces are not that much regular. In this example also you can see the irregular profile of the open space, but this kind of open space give you some amount of feeling of continuity and largeness, whereas the maintenance of the open space becomes sometimes tedious or sometimes challenging, whereas the regular open space is always better to maintain because it is surrounded by the plots. This is another approach. You can see but this kind of approach takes lot of land areas for achieving this kind of this thing. So, density will be very less if we go to this type of approach, where a centralized green areas on and the open spaces are provided, and this kind of local roads are provided as a, we call it a cul-de-sac, which is ending as a dead end. So, that but it is designed in such a way so that some car can then take a round and come back to the road. So, this is the basically overall some of the pictures I have shown in the projects. Various projects are there. You can browse through internet or the books and the reports. You can see many examples are there. You can see and always refer back. So, today we discussed the basically principles of plotted housing. Two fundamental approach we discussed. One is the the hierarchical approach, where the planning is done in a various hierarchical fashion. Another is a continuous approach, where the facilities are provided in a continuous recreational open space. The open space and the network is basically making the non-build component, whereas the building and the facilities making the build component of a plotted housing. And also we discussed how to calculate the number of dwelling unit and the size of the dwelling unit or the plot based on some assumption and based on some overall guidelines given by the housing strategy. So, next day we will discuss the principles of the group housing. So, thank you for today.